You're listening to Elevate, the official podcast of Elite Agent magazine for real estate industry sales professionals, property managers and leaders. Each episode we bring you behind the scenes coaching, news analysis, exclusive interviews, technology and more to help you list more, sell more and elevate your results. To subscribe to the magazine, visit eliteagent.com.au/subscribe. Here is your host, Samantha McLean.
Hey, Samantha McLean from Elite Agent magazine, coming to you with the weekly wrap for the week ended 1st of December. And with me today as my special guest is Adrian Bowe, super agent and super coach from McGrath. So welcome, Adrian, and thanks for coming in to help us wrap up the news this week.
Oh, thanks, Samantha. Pleasure.
So this week has been a bit of a hectic week. It all started a bit slowly, but then lots started happening with the topic of Bitcoin in property has come up again, this time in Queensland with Andrew Coronis pushing the envelope. The top stories of the week on Elite Agent were about managing millennials, customer experience, influencer marketing, and of course how to approach 2018, which is what we're going to be chatting to Adrian about first up. So how are things in your area right now? Are you winding down or are you still crazy busy?
I wouldn't say winding down. I mean, real estate sales is one of those industries where, you know, if you're not working or not dollar productive, you're not income generating. Yeah. There is a difference between being busy and income generating. So a lot of people make the mistake that they're the same thing, but they're not. It's very different to, say, corporate Australia where, you know, you've got certain KPIs which are quite tangible, where in real estate the only tangibilities really are your listing and exchanges. Agents in particular this time of year should be either selling what they've got in terms of surplus stock, private treaties or passed in auctions, and listing properties for January, February next year. There shouldn't be a time where they're not busy or not dollar productive.
Yeah, it's a good time to be out there in front of people at the moment. Well, everyone's in a pretty good mood. I mean, you know, like we've sort of going to put the Christmas tree up a bit later today ourselves. It's really nice to get out there and network and just sort of see clients and do things like that.
Definitely, yeah. It's just that time of year where people are a little bit more relaxed, but agents, if they're working anyway, should definitely be switched on and engaged with their customer base.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been doing a lot of coaching recently, just within the McGrath network. So tell me, what are your objectives for 2018 while everyone's kind of thinking, what are my goals for 2018, both in your business and as a coach? Like, what are you thinking about right now?
We did a roadshow recently which took us to New South Wales and Queensland, just visiting all the offices there. And the common theme for me was how to finish this year really well and therefore how to set up next year even better. So I think finishing this year well for an agent looks like certainly tidying up the inventory they currently have, and it means engaging with your customer base around maybe a client function between now and the end of the year, and also a great opportunity to call your entire database and actually nurture it and clean it at the same time. So that way, starting 2018 with fresh, new, clean data, I think is really important. And also having 4 to 6 auction or private treaty listings to come back to for 2018. So you start fresh in the new year, and as agents we should take this time over the Christmas period as an opportunity to have a rest, to recharge, rejuvenate, spend quality time with family and friends, and then come that middle of January period, come back and actually hit the ground running from that period of time.
Someone actually said to me this week that sometimes it's actually not that quiet, because while a lot of people go on holidays, and we're certainly thinking about it here after the year that we've had, but there are some people around that stay home specifically with the purpose of looking for somewhere new to live, you know, like while it's quiet and while they're off work. So there's a chance that there's still going to be a few people that are going to be quite busy out there.
Absolutely. I mean, the REA stats are that January is one of the busiest periods in terms of their engagements and views and hits. I've been in the industry long enough to remember, 15, 20 years ago, all solicitors, all retail, everything was closed for pretty much all of December and January. So agents would follow suit. But I've certainly noticed over the last few years, the phone starts to ring from both buyers and sellers really in that early to mid-January period at the latest.
Yeah, for sure. So, Adrian, there's a lot of talk about goal setting for 2018 right now, because everyone sort of tends to rewrite their agreement with themselves around this time of the year, New Year's resolutions and all that sort of thing. Then there's the other school of thought which just says that you need to have really, really good processes in your business. So where do you sit on that? Do you think it's important to set goals, or do you think now is the time to reflect on what worked and what didn't work?
That's a very good question, Samantha, and it's something that we deal with a lot with our coaching. Goals can be a bit cliche, and they've sort of been overdone really, but written goals still have their purpose. If you have some key outcomes, then they really should be your goals. So, if getting fit is your key goal or outcome, then there's some processes in place which will get you there, whether it's the right nutrition plan, the right exercise plan, etc. So I think there's room for both processes and goals, and processes are very important now in our business. I advocate a lot that unless you've got really good processes, are really disciplined, have high humility and great energy, then it's very hard to do well in this industry, okay? Because they're innate characteristics, which I feel as an agent and as a coach you either have or you don't, because the acquired skills, if you like, or the nurture as opposed to nature, are negotiation skills, product knowledge, which you can learn in 2 days, realistically. But I find if you're not process-driven, not disciplined, don't have high energy and good humility, then I find that there is a gap between the really great agents and the agents which are not at that type of level. And we are in an industry where 10% of the people are earning 90% of the income, so you really want to be in that 10% club. And what I've been exposed to, people that are processed and have high discipline and great energy usually fall into that category.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I know that you've been trained by John McGrath himself, and he's been a transform coach for us a couple of times now, and he talks about the energy game as well. I'm interested to know, do you think energy is something that can be taught, or is it something that's really got to come from within you?
Look, energy wears a few hats, in my opinion, Samantha, and I really feel it is innate as opposed to acquired. So I think it's a difficult one to teach, to be honest with you. It probably is more of a nature as opposed to a nurture type characteristic. But energy doesn't have to be like Bob Wolf style, which is, extreme hyper energy at the age of 64. So it doesn't have to be physical energy. But energy could just be sitting down with someone, Samantha, in a lounge room as an agent and have the right intent. So sitting there as an agent, and rather than dollar signs emerging in their head, it's sitting there saying, okay, well, how can I help Samantha either get this property sold or buy this property, and ensure that the process is smooth and it's with high integrity, great value, and she has a great customer service experience. So that's called energy, because it's having the right intent.
Yeah.
If a byproduct of that is financial remuneration for the agent, that's great. However, it's not something that you should expect, at least in the short term. I've got clients that I've been dealing with for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and a phone call, a meeting, or a conversation I had 15 years ago literally will eventuate in some sort of financial remuneration for me today. So it is the long-term game that you need to adopt. And energy can come both with intent, can come with physical energy, can come with humility. So I think it's difficult to teach, to answer the question.
Yeah, I think that's a really great tip, though, is that the energy comes from wanting to be over there with your customer, sitting beside them and putting your own personal outcomes aside, whatever they happen to be, and working on the outcome that your customer wants.
That's correct, yeah.
Some interesting stuff happened this week. We had 4 or 5 stories that really trended this week. One was from Scott Downing on customer experience, and I'm going to try and get this guy's name right because I always mispronounce it. The CEO of Google right now, Sundar Pichai, he often says that your customers compare the experience they have with you not to the best experience they've had in real estate, but to the best experience that they have with any service business. And this is why the whole customer experience thing is so important for agents. What do you think agents should focus on to create an amazing customer experience in 2018?
Firstly, Samantha, I agree with his statement, absolutely, and it's very relevant in our industry. So no longer is our competition sort of Ray White or LJ Hooker around the corner in the suburban office. Our competition when a client turns up to our open for inspection is Qantas business class. It's a 3-hat restaurant, because literally that week they've either flown through a quality airline and they've gone to a really nice restaurant and then turned up at our open house. So no longer is our competition just other real estate practices, but it's really other high-end customer service experiences. So I very much agree with that statement. So agents, in my opinion, need to keep that in mind, especially if a customer turns up to, what could be perceived as a high-profile agency, be it McGrath or a Ray White or whoever the case may be, there's probably that additional expectation, Samantha, that the service will be even better than what they would expect from, say, just their local suburban agency. And that's where humility, which is one of those innate characteristics I was talking about, comes into it, where I get a lot of clients turn up to an open house and they see my name badge and say, oh, you're Adrian Bowe, I've seen you everywhere. So to me, that's music to my ears, because it means that ubiquitous type of marketing which I've adopted, which is to have many touch points over many marketing mediums, is working. However, I'm extremely conscious that I've got to have an extra high degree of humility, because the client can sometimes to default thinking that there's an ego involved because the agent is perceived as successful, but there is that additional onus on me to have that humility and obviously offer great customer service.
Yeah, when people have preconceived notions, like I've met people in the industry that I've had preconceived notions about as well, and then find the exact opposite. You've got to work twice as hard, really, to kind of pull that down, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's something that I'm working on constantly, and even with coaching agents, because unfortunately there's that tipping point for a lot of them where they can be quite humble and have the correct intent and have the right mindset and the right headspace, but then success can sometimes breed complacency and can sometimes evolve into an ego, and that's a very dangerous territory for an agent if they're planning on having a long-term, sustainable and resilient business model.
Yeah, an agent today has really got to continually check in with themselves on, why am I thinking this, why am I feeling the way that I am, and make sure that the spotlight is back squarely on that customer.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great industry in that there's no limit in terms of the financial remuneration that's there. However, you really need to keep an eye on the headspace and the humility side of things, because you can get off track quite easily.
Yeah, for sure. In your career, Adrian, is there one particular experience or one wow experience that you've created for a customer that really stands out for you?
I feel that getting great prices at auction, as both the agent and the auctioneer, which I work as, which is a great point of difference in my immediate marketplace, has been very rewarding. And I can think back on a couple of examples where the client has been quite elderly. So one example was a lady who just turned 100. She got a letter from the Queen and from the Premier, and the auction day was extremely successful. It was on site. We achieved 300,000 or 400,000 over the reserve price, and I was acting as the agent and the auctioneer. And she just gave me a big hug and a kiss afterwards, and it was just a very rewarding experience, which is things I've achieved in the past. But I just think that particular sale really reminded me of how important what we do actually is.
Yeah.
Because sure, we're generating a degree of financial reward for the owner, but it's also just that process and that experience which is quite anomalous in their day-to-day life. It's not something that happens every week, every month or every year or every decade for that matter, and it's something that we might do weekly and daily. But yeah, that one in particular I think was definitely a reminder of how important is what we do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it is cricket season at the moment, and scoring a century with the bat is a big deal, and scoring a century in life is an even bigger deal. So well done on that one. Tom Ferry, we've done a couple of interviews with him when Claudio, I'm sure you guys know each other, Claudio and Sina.
Sure.
So Claudio was recently in LA and did a few interviews on our behalf with Coach Tom Ferry. And this week's video, the subject was video first marketing. So Tom, who's always usually on the edge of everything that's technical and social media and hummer and nunna and all of that sort of stuff, banana real estate. So he was sort of saying video first in your approach to marketing. So is that something that you would agree with, that you're encouraging other McGrath agents to do? Is it something that you do yourself?
Yes and yes. I think both with property marketing and personal marketing, video is something that you can't ignore, and it ties in quite nicely with social media, which is obviously something you can't ignore these days. So I feel that the old property marketing of, say, your virtual tour has been superseded by very much a video, and there's just so much more scale around it in terms of drone photography and virtual photography and things like that, which is outstanding. I think the old virtual tours were a great entry into that space, but this has certainly taken it to a whole new level. Then there's the music attached to it, and it really creates an energy, I suppose, around it, and especially if the agent is appearing in it or a professional presenter. We do a bit of both. I quite like the professional presenter in that's their full-time business and they sell the property extremely well, but from a personal marketing perspective, or even for the owner's advantage, having the agent I think is quite beneficial in the video as well. So I feel that both for agent marketing and property marketing, video is something, as long as it's sort of within 60 seconds or so, I feel that you can maintain and capture people's attention, definitely.
So next up we had a story from one of our PR writers actually on influencer marketing in real estate. And basically what she's saying is that, well, PR has changed really, and we know that from where we sit as publishers. You know, the way we deal with PR people is very different these days compared to what it used to be. But she's actually had some really good success, not just with sending press releases to the regular news outlets, but actually starting to use influencers on Instagram and bloggers and things like that. So instead of sending the photos of the property to the paper, what you do is you get the Instagram influencer who might have tens of thousands of followers to take pictures of themselves in the property to get that property out there. Is that something that you've heard of or that you've looked into? Or
I haven't heard of it in the real estate space, but it doesn't surprise me. I am aware that it is taking place in terms of merchandise and labels and brands. So the obvious segue into property, I think there's definitely a space for it. Really, you need to follow where the eyes are, and the eyes are on iPhones and on Instagram, and there are people making substantial livings out of being a full-time Instagram influencer. And if part of that means real estate brands or real estate properties, I think it's an obvious step into that space. I think as an agent, though, that you can get a bit confused around waking up every day and say, okay, how should I promote myself and how should I promote my clients' properties, given that there are so many mediums? You know, I mean, when I started real estate 20-odd years ago, there was the local paper and the classifieds on a Saturday and the signboard. That was about it.
I remember that too.
Yeah, so not a lot has changed, but in saying that, a lot has changed as well, because signboard's still there. Print media is not dead. You know, it's certainly a medium that we're still using.
I love it every time someone says that too.
Well, it's true. It's true, you know, and I think that when internet marketing, say REA and Domain first came out, what we would say and believe and advocate and tell clients was that, you know, the younger generation were looking on the internet to search for property and the older generation were looking at print media. But now the internet marketing is indiscriminate of age or gender. Really what it is you're aggressive, active buyers are on the internet and your more passive buyers are looking through print media and then maybe reverting to the internet marketing for more information and or contacting the agent. There are the fundamentals still in place, but there literally are a lot of options for agents. So I think the idea is not to get too confused around it. I think pick something that you believe in and something that you can sell. A lot of agents get caught up on what I call analysis paralysis, where they'll overanalyze everything to a degree that they paralyze themselves and do nothing. So that happens with business plans, happens with personal marketing, happens with CRMs, it happens with property marketing. Believe in something, work it really well, and do it 100% rather than trying to do 17 things at sort of 25% each.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Lastly, the top story of the week. This one was a bit of a surprise to us, but very cool, was Alison McGavin from Real Plus talking about a new way of working. And in that story, she was talking about one of the things that's very close to, I think, some of us Gen Xers is how to manage millennials more effectively. And she's sort of saying that we have to be more creative. And it's true, because with a lot of younger agents coming up the ranks, that they like to feel more like they're part of a family rather than in a formal working relationship. Have you had any experience with that?
I have, Samantha, and I've got 2 millennials working in my team at the moment, and I actually find it really refreshing to work with them. So one, for example, in my opinion, is what I call the new breed of young real estate agents. So Harrison, he's gone to a great private school. He went to do his Bachelor of Business in Land Economics, which is the only real estate degree you can do effectively, and has entered into a sales team, my team, with no delusions that he's going to be, you know, having his own team or be his own agent anytime soon, and is very focused, very driven. But sure, are there different metrics, different KPIs that you would have had 10, 15 years ago for another mid-20s, late 20s person? Probably yes. And I think a lot of agents can sort of create excuses for themselves, saying millennials might be a little bit more challenging to manage. But I haven't had that experience, to be honest.
I think the media have given them a bad name too.
Yeah, sure. I think that they're probably a bit less delusional around their expectations. I find that their work ethic is, in my experience anyway so far, has been with great intent. And I think their loyalty might have skipped a generation, and I find they're actually using loyalty and practicing it and breathing it rather than just talking about it. Because loyalty is something that a lot of people talk about but don't get often much of a chance to exercise on.
Yeah, so I think the tip there in managing millennials is to be very definite about your values.
Sure.
And to make sure that you live by them, because that's what they'll be looking at, right?
Absolutely, yeah, where it's as easy to talk about, and it's almost a bit cliche with, if you look at any corporate website, what are their values? Well, it's integrity, it's honesty, it's loyalty, it's professionalism, but do they actually live and breathe them every day?
Yeah.
So an individual or a real estate professional needs to have their own website and their own set of values, but not just read them and tick them off, but actually live and breathe them every day and actually exercise them as well. Look for opportunities to actually exercise your values rather than just talk about them.
Yeah, so the experience is consistent with what you're seeing and what you're actually getting in front of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, lastly, something that millennials are very familiar with is Bitcoin, or cryptocurrency, which has been a lot of stories bubbling around that in the last few weeks again, about agents being the first ones to sell a property. And we saw Andrew Coronis this week on the telly. He's got a property for sale where the owner is prepared to accept Bitcoin. Now, this property is unencumbered right now, and literally, I suppose you could have a Bitcoin transaction between one party and another, but it would still need to be converted back to Australian dollars just like any other foreign exchange transaction. But I'm interested, you work in the eastern suburbs of Sydney where there's a lot of foreign buyers, there's a lot of luxury buyers and things like that. Have you had any experiences with people offering you Bitcoin for property?
Not as yet. It's a very new space, and it's certainly not a space that anyone wants to ignore, because the current auction system, in terms of the way buyers pay deposit, is becoming antiquated, in that there needs to be some sort of legal consideration on the day, and the only legal consideration apart from signing the contract is some sort of currency. And most millennials, so tying into the millennials, have never owned a checkbook in their lives, and the checkbook is really the most appropriate, or if not the only form of deposit that we're actually accepting. So a lot of millennials, or even people in their 30s, sometimes even the early 40s, having to get a single cheque from the bank in order to bid at the auction, or worse, they're actually getting a bank cheque which is costing them money and then bringing that to the auction, and they may not be successful. Yeah,
I think the one sure thing really is just what you were saying. It does feel, and I know we're on the path to digital property transactions, PEXA, and those people are thinking in terms of how do we exchange contracts digitally, but you're right in what you say, is that it's hard to believe we're still sort of signing cheques in today's day and age with all the digital technology, and that it still even takes 12 weeks to settle a property. Other countries around the world can settle in days or hours even, and it still takes us weeks and weeks. It sort of seems pretty crazy. So, it'd be interesting to see what does happen in the next year, I suppose. It's a really interesting space. Moving on, I think we're nearly there, Adrian. How's that? You've survived.
No problem. No, it's been great.
So just to sum up, give us a few tips on what you think the real keys to success in 2018 are going to be, and what do you see for the market in 2018?
Okay, so for agents, some tips for the new year is just to remember that what made you successful last year or the year before is not necessarily going to make you successful in the new year. So I think working closer with buyers, I think, is going to be key.
Yeah.
The old rules around just focusing on listings and buyers will come, that's probably going to become antiquated, in my opinion. So focusing on buyers first, and looking at not complicating your business as well, choosing the appropriate time formats of actual marketing yourself, so not getting too complicated and confused around which social media platform should you be using. I think also having a resilient database that you can actually nurture and that will actually feed you pieces of business in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So I've been very fortunate from day one, 20 odd years ago, at identifying that every person I met that owned a piece of real estate, I was going to database them. I didn't know what I was going to do with them at the time, but I just knew I had to create a database. And now today that's 18,000 people, and there is a whole separate nurturing process around that by phoning, emailing, lettering, calling, whatever it might be. So identifying firstly that you need to have data, because that creates a resilient model for you, so you're not experiencing that volatility around your income. So in that you have a very good month and then the next month may not be so good, and then the pattern just repeats itself. That's because you're relying on people contacting you, which should always be some form of your business, but not all of it.
Yeah.
So you need to be proactively contacting clients even when you've got a lot of listings on your plate. So I think the keys are work with buyers, have some clean data, be careful around getting too bogged down in either your CRM or your marketing mediums, and just also managing people's expectations. Now that could mean buyers, it could mean your vendors, it could mean your staff, because the landscape's changing, the market is evolving, the competition is higher, fees are more competitive, prices are stabilising. So again, what made you successful today is not necessarily going to make you successful next year.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's very close to what got you here won't get you there.
That's right.
One of my favourite quotes from John. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for coming in and joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you along.
Thanks, Samantha. Appreciate the opportunity.
And good luck in 2018, and we'll see all you guys next week.
Thank you.
To subscribe to the magazine, visit eliteagent.com.au/subscribe.